Dr. No is a 1962 spy film directed by Terence Young. It is the first film in the James Bond series starring Sean Connery. Monty Norman was invited to write the film's score because Berkely liked his work on the 1961 theatre production Belle, a musical about murderer Hawley Harvey Crippen. Norman was busy with musicals and only agreed to do the music in Dr. No after Saltzman allowed him to travel along with the crew to Jamaica. The most famous composition of the soundtrack is the James Bond theme, which is heard in the Gun Barrel Secrets, and the Calypso medley over the title credits, which was written by Norman based on the previous composition of his. John Barry would later go on to compose the music for 11 Bond films, arrange James Bond's theme, but was uncredited except for the credit of his own orchestra playing the final piece. It has occasionally been suggested that Barry, not Norman, composed the James Bond theme. This argument has been subject of 2 court cases, the most recent in 2001, which found in favour of Norman. The theme was written by Norman and arranged by Barry, and was described by another Bond film composer, David Arnold, as a bebop swing vibe coupled with vicious, dark, distorted electrical guitar, and definitely an instrument of rock and roll. It is representative of everything about the character you would want. It was cocky, swaggering, confident, dark, dangerous, suggestive, sexy, unstoppable, and he did it all in 2 minutes. In the end, Dr. No, upon its release, would end up making $59.6 million worldwide, against $1 million budget, which made it a huge success, even for its time. In 2003, the scene of Andress emerging from the water in a bikini topped Channel 4's list of the 100 sexiest scenes in film history. The bikini was sold in 2001 at an auction for $61,500. Now, one of the most iconic scenes in the whole film, of course, is the introduction of James Bond for the first time. The character is introduced towards, but not at the beginning of the film, and is now a famous nightclub sequence featuring Sylvia Trench, to whom he makes his immortal introduction. The introduction to the character in La Calle Les Ambassadeurs at Upmarket Gambling Club is derived from Bond's introduction in the first novel of Casino Royale, which Fleming had used because skill at gambling and knowledge of how to behave in a casino was seen as attributes of a gentleman. After losing the hand to chemin de fer to Bond, Trench asks his name. This is the most important gesture, is the way he lights his cigarette before giving her the satisfaction of an answer. Bond. James Bond. Once Connery says this line, Monty Norman's Bond theme plays and creates an undeniable link between the music and the character. In the short scene introducing Bond, there are portrayed qualities of strength, action, reaction, violence, and this elegant, slightly brutal gambler with a quizzical sneer when we see before us who answers a woman when he's good at and ready.
I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Following the release of Dr. No, the quote Bond, James Bond, became a catchphrase that ended the lexicon of Western popular culture. In 2001, it was voted as the best-loved one-liner in cinema by British cinema goers, and in 2005 it was honoured as the 22nd greatest quotation in cinema history by the American Film Institute as part of its 100-year series. Dr. No was one of the first 25 Bond films produced by Eon, which have grossed just over $5 billion in box office returns alone, making the series one of the highest grossing ever. It is estimated that since Dr. No, a quarter of the world's population have seen at least one Bond film. Dr. No has also launched a successful genre of secret agent films that flourished in the 1960s. The UK Film Distributors Association have stated that the importance of Dr. No to the British film industry cannot be overstated, as it and the subsequent Bond series of films form the backstone of the industry. Sales of Fleming novels also rose sharply after the release of Dr. No and subsequent films. In the 7 months after Dr. No was released, 1.5 million copies of the novel were sold. Between the years of 1962 to 1967, a total of nearly 22.8 million Bond novels were sold. On the 5th of October 2012, 50 years after the release of the film, Eon Productions celebrated Global James Bond Day, a series of events around the world. The events included film festival showings of the James Bond films, a documentary of the series, an online auction for charity, and further events at the Museum of Modern Art and the Toronto International Film Festival. A concert of various music was held in Los Angeles in conjunction with the New York event. Some fun little tidbits from the movie. Contrary to popular belief, Sean Connery was not wearing a hairpiece in the first 2 outings as James Bond, although he was already balding by the time of Dr. No was in production. He still had a decent amount of hair, and the filmmakers used varying techniques to make most of what was left. By the time of Goldfinger 1964, Connery's hair was often too thin, and so various toupees were used for his last upon outings. Connery was also morbidly afraid of spiders. The shot of the spider in the bed was done with a sheet of glass between him and the spider, which can be seen in one shot in the movie. When this didn't look realistic enough, additional close-up scenes were reshot with stuntman Bob Simmons. Maurice Binder designed the gun barrel opening sequence at the last minute by pointing a pinhole camera through a real gun barrel. The actor in the sequence is not Sean Connery, but a stuntman Bob Simmons. Connery didn't film the sequence until Thunderball in 1965. After viewing the movie for the first time, James Bond creator Ian Fleming reportedly described it as being dreadful, simply dreadful. Ian Fleming didn't originally like the casting of Sean Connery as James Bond. Bond was English and Connery was Scottish. Bond was from an upper-class background and Connery came from a working-class background. Bond was refined and educated and Connery was too rugged. After seeing this movie, Fleming softened though and decided that Connery was perfectly cast. In the novel On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond was revealed to have a Scottish ancestry, and Bond's girlfriend Teresa, Tracy Vincenzo, was described with Ursula Andress's details. Now, what more can I say about Dr. No? Of course, this is where it all started. Yes, in some ways the film is quite dated. Yes, there's a complete macho aspect to it, and it can be quite chauvinistic, but I suppose at the time this is how the film was sort of interpreted and made. And in that way it doesn't really date well, but it's more the nostalgia factor of the film that really keeps you invested. Knowing full well that this is where it all started, this iconic character with all these wonderful catchphrases, this wonderful idea of traveling the world with a spy on adventures of pure escapism. Also, the film was groundbreaking for the time. For example, the Vatican condemned Dr. No, describing it as a dangerous mixture of violence, vulgarity, sadism and sex, while the Kremlin said that Bond was the personification of capitalist evil. Both controversies helped increase public awareness of the film and greater screen attendance. And for me, that's what makes this film stand out. You've got to take it into context. This film was released in 1962. Nobody had ever done this before, and that's what makes it so unique and special. As with all the James Bond films, the films are done in a tongue-in-cheek way. Even the sex is harmless, if you will. It's a fully submerged self-parody of itself in some ways. But like most of them, they are crisp and well-tailored and just grip you from the start. Particularly now when you think that the film was made on a measly $1 million budget, the production had to be so clever and imaginative, and I think that makes it even more special for me as well. Now, obviously, casting the right man to play Bond was imperative for this to work, and for me, to this day, I still believe Sean Connery is arguably the best actor to ever portray James Bond. He just found the right sort of sense for the character. He understood the dynamics of the character. He had the right amount of panache, smoothness and charm, but was also rugged, tough, and looked like he could fight. And for me, it's Connery alone that really makes Dr. No work as a movie all this time later. As a henchman for the first outing, Dr. No as an antagonist was okay. The story was fine, but it was really about introducing us now as a viewer to Sean Connery playing this iconic character. Letting us go to Jamaica, hearing that wonderful music, even the introduction of the character. The idea of the Bond girl here, played perfectly by Ursula Andress, who at the end of the day just looked right for the role. It's all these little factors that makes this movie work so well. It was a bold filmmaking choice, and boy did it pay off in the long run. This is cinema history at its best, and it's one of those films that I love to just sit down and watch and look back to where the series started, back in 1962. With little to no budget, with just a few men having a few ideas, but taking it from a source material written by the excellent writer Ian Fleming to make this grand, sophisticated film series that of course has taken the world by storm. And it's for those reasons Dr. No gets an 8.5 out of 10.